Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
It's time for the Sports Blitz, the only live-streamed local sports show in Arkansas, with all the latest on the sports stories that matter to you. Live from the Lions Den Golf Club studio, here are your hosts, Mark Freeman and Weldon Braxton.
Well, the Arkansas Razorbacks football season has come to a merciful end. Hogs should have beaten LSU on Friday. 31-27 loss. We'll talk about that. And Alabama losing in the craziest fashion I could have ever imagined in the Iron Bowl. Welcome into the Sports Blitz on a Monday after an abbreviated week last week with the Thanksgiving holiday. We hope you enjoyed your time with family and friends. Welcome into the Cogswell Motors Studios. Mark Freeman, Weldon Braxton, Maddie Lassiter in here on a Monday. Weldon, what a weekend in sports.
See, we can already tell your perspective on the Alabama game from the fact that you framed it the way Alabama lost.
Yes.
A lot of people around the country are saying
Auburn won.
Yeah, Auburn won in dramatic fashion. Not Mr. Freeman over here. We certainly understand where you're coming from because now, Mark, the SEC, their scenarios as far as getting into the national championship game have become a lot more difficult, all nearly impossible. Of course, some things have to happen in the Big Ten and possibly the ACC. We're going to go over these BCS scenarios and, what if this team beats them? Then does this team still have a shot if this and that happens? We'll dig into a little bit of that. I think that'll be a fun thing to do. I also want to look at the Heisman race because now the Heisman race, all bets are off underneath Jameis Winston. Now, we don't know anything on his case. We've talked about that at length, so we don't have to go back into the case itself. But if something were to happen in that situation and Jameis Winston is off the books, where do you go as a Heisman voter? Because A.J. McCarron, although he played pretty well, he did lose on a big stage. His team did lose, so that'll be interesting. Then the Hog basketball team went out to Maui, went 1-2, saw some good things, saw some not so good things. We'll talk about that as well.
Just a whole lot of stuff to get to today. I did frame the Alabama thing the way I did because I did pick Alabama to win the national championship. You see this black shirt that we're wearing today. This is in honor of the end of the Razorback football season and also the end of my reign picking the national champion the last 2 years. Went with Alabama, and I said until somebody proves me wrong with Nick Saban losing in a big game, I'll pick Alabama to win it. They lose the Iron Bowl in Jordan-Hare, and it was just the craziest thing. I mean, I'm still, to this moment, talking about it, thinking about it. It makes me mad because I feel like Auburn is the luckiest school in the world. They had everything go right with Scam Newton a couple years ago. They have everything. I mean, down to Alabama in the Iron Bowl, come back in miraculous fashion to win the game. Go ahead and win in the national championship game against Oregon. They just had everything, that lucky rabbit's foot. And then this year, have the tip pass to beat. They should have lost a game already to Georgia. Then they come across I cannot understand how they beat Alabama. Just trying to factor this into my mind right now. The fact was, Alabama had the ball. Alabama just scored a touchdown on a 99-yard touchdown pass. I thought right then, okay, that's all she wrote. That broke the camel's back. Auburn goes for it on fourth down inside their own 40-yard line. Don't get it. Alabama has the ball in field goal range and a 7-point lead. Ball game. Somehow,
I think so.
Alabama doesn't score. Auburn scores on what really was a great play by Marshall to come across and make it look like he was running and fling it for a touchdown. Then the field goal. For those that didn't get to watch it, you've got to go check it out because it was just an incredible finish. But Alabama tries to kick a 57-yard field goal. Auburn obviously has somebody underneath the field goal post a la Antonio Cromartie, standing underneath there for I guess it was the Chargers back then, to field a long field goal that was short and catch it and run it back. Alabama with the big men in there. Weldon will explain to you how that happened in a moment. Catches the field goal that came up short and runs it back for a touchdown with no time left to win the game. Could have stepped out of bounds, could have been tackled, could have had 100 different things happen. The field goal could have been 4 yards longer and went in. I mean, just a million different options that could have happened. But at the end of the day, the one that was probably a 0.0001% chance.
It happened.
Happens.
It did, and to look at the actual play and the way it happened, and a lot of people are wondering, why do you have so many, big guys on the field that they can't catch them, they can't cover? Well, it's obvious. I mean, if you ever watch football, you have to protect the field goal. You need some linemen, you need guards and tackles to protect, make sure the kick doesn't get blocked. You've got a low trajectory kick anyway because of the extensive distance that it is. So obviously, protection is the first key. Henceforth, you having a lot of big people on the field anyway. So that's why there weren't a lot of D-backs and linebackers on the field and what have you. Now, as Nick Saban said in the post-game press conference, teams do work on fanning out after missed field goals. They work on it because if you kick a long field goal, there's a chance the other team could return it. The problem, I think, and what made it difficult for Alabama was the fact that the kick was on a hash. So now, if the ball were in the middle of the field, you would have a normal fan out. Of course, what it means to fan is you spread out and you cover the whole field. Usually the guys on the outside on each side will cover the area closest to the sideline on in, making a fan shape. Well, now that you have a kick that's on a hash, the person who's on the field side, the edge guys on the field side of the formation, they now have to fan all the way across the field, so you have to have more of an exaggerated, wider fan, and I don't think Alabama was accustomed to covering that, which gave Auburn the opportunity to return it. So that's what happened on the play. Now, Mark, you, I, and our producer, Maddie, we had the discussion about the decision itself, leading up to it, Nick Saban's thought process. I think you and I were on the same page. I didn't have a problem with the decision, just because they were struggling not only from a kicking standpoint, but they were also struggling defensively. I mean, Gus Malzahn, the adjustments that he made, I thought going to the midline option and then a few other wrinkles he put in really made it difficult for Alabama. In an overtime situation, you have a long-range kicker who's made kicks in practice. You've worked on fanning. There's a risk to it all, Mark, but I don't question the decision. I just think you have to live with it, and Auburn got a very fortunate play.
All this happens after Alabama busts off a long run and steps out of bounds with .01 second on the clock. The clock had supposedly run out. Nope, there's 1 second left. So instead of going to overtime, all this happens because Alabama has the 1 second left, and they try to kick the field goal. I'm in agreement with Weldon. A lot of people say, well, throw the Hail Mary or just sit on it and go to overtime. For the reasons that he mentioned, I wouldn't have tried to go to overtime. I would have, if you have a shot to kick a field goal or to throw a Hail Mary, in my opinion, the Hail Mary is less likely than a field goal, even from that distance. You've seen field goals made from that distance. I know if Zach Hawker were kicking it, I would have a better than 50% chance, in my opinion, that he's going to make the kick. So if you've got a guy that you've seen in practice make 60-plus yard field goals, which they have to have seen, or else they would have just said, well, it's not possible, he's not going to make it, we'll just throw the Hail Mary, or we'll kneel on it, or they wouldn't have fought for the second if they didn't think that they could make the kick. Just the bottom line is it was a 0.1% chance that the play would happen the way it did. What if in Alabama, there were a couple guys who had opportunities to tackle him. If they had tackled him, it's over right there. Or if somebody had just bumped him out of bounds. He was this far from the sideline at one moment. If one of those guys had just bumped him out of bounds, we're going to overtime. So it was so many different things had to happen right, and that's why I call Alabama or Auburn so lucky, because it just happens their way. Seems like every time things go their way. Have to give them credit where it's due, though. I think Brad Caldwell's going to come on at 11:30, and he'll give Auburn plenty of love for all of us. So we'll talk about Gus Malzahn and Auburn, I'm sure, when Brad calls in to take his victory lap. But
you're an Auburn fan?
That'll be at about 11:30. Well, he's just a big Gus fan.
Yeah,
right?
I'm a Gus fan too, but I'm thinking maybe Mr. Caldwell wants to become an Auburn fan.
Well, you should see some of the stuff on Facebook and Twitter where people are like, "Are you an Auburn fan? Why don't you just change over and change your allegiances?" I think he'll defend himself.
We'll speak with him.
He'll defend himself here in just a little bit. But this game is to say nothing of Arkansas losing to LSU in heartbreaking fashion when Arkansas had the lead. Had a chance to go down and basically salt the game away with one more or maybe two more first downs against LSU, up 27-24 with the ball. And Brandon Allen, I know he's taken a lot of flack this year. He did throw for 2 touchdown passes, and Arkansas was right there in the game in Death Valley against LSU. But one play comes to mind, and I don't remember who it was yesterday. It was one of my friends, Dustin Zeeler, who made the comment. He said, it's 3rd and 10, and Brandon Allen gets flushed, and he runs up the middle, and instead of diving for the first down, he slides 2 yards short.
Right.
And that's just Arkansas' season in a microcosm. And Arkansas ends up losing. You see how it happened in heartbreaking fashion, 1 minute and 15 seconds left. And Anthony Jennings, a backup quarterback who had all day to throw because Arkansas dropped back into coverage. Coverage busts when I don't know why Arkansas would drop back into coverage knowing they don't have anybody who can cover anybody. And Traven Durrell, you ever heard of him? Me either. Scores a touchdown to win the game. Arkansas goes down for the Golden Boot. Probably the last time we're going to see it on a day after Thanksgiving, and it's a tough way to lose.
It's a tough way to lose, and you look at that game, just some of the moments that stick out at you. My first question, what I wonder, and I don't know if we'll ever get the answer to it, Brandon Allen's shoulder. Now, I know he struggled this year, and I've been critical of Brandon Allen. I'm not making an excuse for him whatsoever. But you just think of the missed opportunities that I think may have resulted because of his shoulder situation or him at least thinking about it. You look at that 3rd down, that opportunity to convert a first down on the run. He may have been thinking about his shoulder, trying to protect it. You look at the 2 deep balls. One he missed, I think it may have been Javonte Hearn. Somebody over the middle, deep down the field, he couldn't get enough on it. He was wide open, would have been a deep touchdown. Then the interception that he threw in the back of the end zone was underthrown. Brandon Allen, from an arm strength standpoint, I know he's never had the biggest arm anyway. I just wonder if something lingering from that injury had something to do with it. And as far as the 99-yard touchdown drive, I mean, that's been typical Arkansas this year. I mean, I hate to say it. I was hoping Chris Ash would bring a little bit more heat. What you don't want to do is give this quarterback running lanes and easy throws, easy wide open throws. If you can make him drop back and have to look through coverage, make tight throws under pressure, then you've got something against a young quarterback who's not the best throwing the ball early in his career. It's hard to say what happened on that last play. It looked to me like first the cornerback got nosy and he didn't play his responsibility. At the same time, it looked like they were in some type of cover 4, and different coaches teach it differently. Some coaches teach, well, even if you have a deep quarter, if there is a hitch or something ran in front of you, you can still react to it and play it. Some coaches just say you bail out no matter what. I don't know how Arkansas teaches it. I don't know if that's what they were doing. It's hard to say. All I do know, Mark, is Arkansas now has lost 9 straight games. They've lost, 12 straight SEC games.
Ugh.
It is very difficult times for Razorback Nation.
Yeah, I was looking at it, and obviously I'm not the defensive mind. You are, as far as knowing, all the schemes and stuff. But it looked like, and Bielema said himself, there should have been safety help there. It looked like the corner thought, okay, I got to drop off because I got a route coming in front of me, and I've got safety help over the top. So my area is over here in the flats. I've got to get up there and protect that. And then whenever he saw there was no safety help, he's running along with, and then it makes him look bad.
And that could be right too, because that would make sense because the safety was eaten up by an inside route. The inside guy had ran vertical too. So if they're playing some type of cover two rules tell you that if you're a corner and number 2 goes deep, then you have to go deep also because your safety help has now been eaten up. So I don't know how they run it, but if it is a cover 2, then that would make sense. At that point, I would say the corner though should have bailed out.
Yeah,
but it's hard to say. The result is though heartbreaking loss. You had a chance to win on the road against your rivals to, I don't want to say salvage your season, but at least not make it look as bad, and they just couldn't cash.
Well, it would have been a Bobby Petrino situation. His first year, they had this terrible season, ends in a high note because they beat LSU, and it would have been almost a picture, a mirror image of what it was. I guess it was 2007 or 8.
Yeah,
8 would have been his first year, where it was just a horrible season that ended on a bright note. And honestly, I think we can take a lot of positives away from this season. You have to look pretty hard, but you can find some positives this season. Alex Collins had 1,000 yards. Hunter Henry came on late, scored 2 touchdowns in this game. You saw, I don't want to say anything about the defense because the defense was just terrible for most of the year. You saw some guys who made an effort. The corners that came in, Dean and Collins, I don't hate them as much as I hated the corners that were in before them. I do think that the defensive line played very well and gave Arkansas a chance in the games that they had a chance in. I think that if A.J. Turner and Otha Peters don't transfer, as was the rumor, then Arkansas will be better in the linebacking core. You can't be worse. And, the defensive backs, you're going to have to recruit some safeties that can figure out how to cover and how to tackle and how to just play football in general. But you've got some things to build on. I don't think next year is going to be much better. I'll just be honest with you. I think
agree.
some things can go Arkansas's way, and they can get to 5 or possibly 6 wins, which if you look at this year, they had the Rutgers game they should have won, the Mississippi State game they could have won, and the LSU game they could have won. That's 6 wins if everything goes Arkansas's way, and they just didn't. This seems to be one of those years where, it's the opposite of Ohio State and Auburn, where everything, instead of going your way, goes against you. Things come back around. Eventually, Arkansas is going to be all right.
Yeah, and I want to see what happens with Turner and Peters too, because really going back to spring football, something just hasn't been right with them, this coaching staff. I know injuries. I know Turner had a wrist injury or something in the spring, but just going back to when this coaching staff got here, just something wasn't gelling with those linebackers. Something didn't gel between those guys and the coaching staff. I want to see how that goes as well. Really disappointed that some of the JUCO help didn't do a little more.
Yep.
Carroll Washington did a little bit, but you look at a guy like Ty Coleman, thought he may come in and give him something. He didn't give him as much as I thought he would. And if
the linebackers, man.
Yeah, the linebackers.
Spate and Tavares.
And those guys. And you look at JUCO guys, they're supposed to be guys who, they have to get used to SEC speed and obviously an increase in competition. But from a physical standpoint and somewhat from a mental perspective, they're supposed to be a little bit more ready. That was a little bit disappointing, but you look at this 2014 recruiting class, I think they're trying to get some things together. We talked about, they didn't land Frazier, but you still have Jackson coming in. They got some pieces. This group will be better as well. I don't think it's time to just throw in the towel on Coach Bielema, but hey, there are people around the state who are ready. I mean, there's more than a few who just say, look, I just don't think he's the guy. I think this is Houston Nut Part 2. All we do is run the ball, which, by the way, I thought Jim Chaney did a nice job of mixing in his play calling on Friday. I thought that was a huge deal. Thought Arkansas, from a balance standpoint, was right. They were right where they needed to be. But, Coach Bielema's got a lot to answer for, and he doesn't have a whole lot in year 2 to look forward to. It's not like this is a team we can see Mark going to 8 or 9 wins in year 2. I'm right with you. I still see about a 6-win team next year, which makes you wonder, 3 wins, 6 wins, year 3. You talk about a warm seat for Coach B. That's just me projecting out long term.
Yeah, Arkansas played 6 ranked teams, and they lost 9 games. Okay, so looking at it from a logic perspective, they lost to Ole Miss on the road. They lost to Mississippi State in overtime. They should have won that game. And then they lost to Rutgers, who just fell apart, but Arkansas had a 24-7 lead. Really, if you just think about it, there's only 1 game, 2 games possible at most that they should have won that they didn't. So looking at the schedule, Rutgers, they should have probably won. Mississippi State at home, you should have won. But every other game, you went in thinking, okay, this is probably going to be a loss. Now, coming into the year, I thought Auburn was going to be – I didn't think Auburn was going to be near what they are.
No.
So I have to give them credit and take my own lumps. But at the end of the day, Arkansas pretty much did what I expected them to do. I was hoping that they could beat a couple more of these teams and get to 6 wins, possibly 7, but I feel like a fool for saying that beginning of the year, 6 wins, possibly 7. But at the end of the day, I thought Auburn was going to be terrible, so I feel like a fool more than once. So we've got a whole lot left to talk about today on the show. We've asked today's CrossFit Russellville poll question, who should play in the national championship game? This can go any number of different directions. Do you think that you want to go with who deserves to play in the national championship, who you would like to see in the national championship, who should play in the national championship? But the BCS rankings are out. You've got Florida State at number 1, Ohio State at number 2, Auburn at number 3, Alabama at number 4, and Missouri at number 5. If my Crimson Tide, I just said it, because I picked them to win the national championship, are going to get back in the national championship picture, there's going to have to be some stuff happen to get them there. We'll talk about the scenarios. We'll talk about who should play in the national championship game, and we'll look at some local stuff right after the break.
RiverValleyLeader.com is the #1 local source for instant news in the River Valley, offering HD video and live streaming along with top-notch coverage of all the news and events around the area. The River Valley Leader is the only place to go for all the information you need. Check out the newest local business featured on the site, as well as police news and coverage from important meetings, along with the personal stories, all at one convenient click. Check out rivervalleyleader.com.
Hi folks, Richard Roberts with Cogswell Motors in Russellville. You know, we've been in business since 1949. A dealership doesn't stay in business that long under the same ownership unless you're doing something right, and that's taking care of customers. We have the largest selection of new Ford, Lincoln, Mazda, and pre-owned vehicles in the River Valley. So if you want the most for your trade, the best interest rate on financing, and the best price on a new or pre-owned automobile, come to Russellville and see us. We're at 1900 East Main, or visit us on the web at cogswellmotors.com.
If you didn't count on KARK4 today this morning,
here's what you missed.
Updated news.
Police continue searching for suspects after a home intrusion overnight.
Developing stories.
There's another piece of presidential history turning up here in Arkansas.
And weather and traffic on the force.
Friday night, Saturday morning will bring us our next chance of rain.
Every 10 minutes.
Around the clock.
Making your day easier.
So rise and shine and count on.
Count on.
Count on. KRK4 today.
Over 69 years of treating you like family, Peters Family Living's main goal is customer service. That is their promise to their customers. They offer in-house financing on furniture and appliances and a 30-day money-back guarantee. For a friendly, no-pressure atmosphere, visit Peters Family Living today at 201 North Arkansas Avenue, Russellville. Online at petersfamilyliving.com or call 479-968-2929.
Today, there are more than 20 brands of cars being sold in America. So to be noticed, Ford and Cogswell Motors have to go further than anyone thought we could. How does Ford stand out above the crowd? Not just with plug-in vehicles like the new 2013 Ford Fusion Energy that gets a projected 100 miles per gallon equivalent, but also with a line of gas vehicles equipped with the innovative EcoBoost engines combining power and efficiency, plus a full measure of technologically advanced features. We invite you to stop into Cogswell Motors today. We go further than anyone thought we could, so that you can go further too.
Welcome back to the Sports Blitz on a Monday. Mark Freeman, Weldon Braxton, Maddie Lassiter in the Cogswell Motors studios. We'll get back to college football and who should play in the national championship game after we take a look at our Peters Family Living local sports look. We told you last week about the Arkansas Tech Golden Suns volleyball team winning the Great American Conference. Proverbial hats off to those ladies on a trip to the national tournament. They're taking on, I'm trying to think of who it was. I just saw it the other day. Minnesota Duluth in the Division II volleyball tournament that takes place on Thursday. Yeah,
I was on the campus. Yeah, visiting their football coach and their staff. Yeah,
nice. Well, that's going to be a big, big game for the Arkansas Tech Golden Suns. Congratulations on an incredible season. Now you're playing one of the top 10, at least I think it's top 10 teams in the country. I think Arkansas Tech was the 8th seed, and they're the 1 seed in the region. So that's going to be a tough one for the Golden Suns, but they've earned a volleyball championship in the Great American Conference for the second time in 3 years, and it's going to go a long way, like we said, to winning that all-sports trophy for the Arkansas Tech sports programs in the Great American Conference. Looking forward to seeing them make that run. Another thing that's going to help that is the success of the basketball teams. The Golden Suns and Wonder Boys both playing very well right now, particularly the Wonder Boys. They hosted the Thanksgiving Classic here at Arkansas Tech on over the weekend. They beat number 21 Northeastern State 73-68, and then they turned around and beat number 6 Midwestern State 58-57 in comeback fashion. The Wonder Boys playing very well. I know this tournament was at home, but to beat 2 ranked teams in the same weekend is a big deal.
It really is. It's good for your confidence. Good to make sure you can get on the track you need to be. We talked
good for the resume.
Yeah, good for the resume. And we talked about Arkansas Tech. They were coming off a tough loss, high scoring. We know this Tech team can put points on the board. We know defensively they can get after you. I think Coach K was looking for some, a little bit more consistent half-court defense. They can get after you full court, and a little bit more consistency in the half-court on offense. And they're getting there. Again, Arkansas Tech basketball now a powerhouse, and we need them to contribute to the all-sports cause as well. Get everybody in on the mix.
Definitely. The Arkansas Tech Golden Suns fell to number 5 Central Missouri lost their first game of the year. They're 4-1 now. They're right on the heels of, I think they're, in the next few weeks, they'll win some more games. They got a 100-something to 44 win the other day. They're going to be ranked here in the near future, and they're going to be one of the better teams in the Great American Conference. So keep your eyes open for Arkansas Tech men's and women's basketball action. You got to get out there to Tucker Coliseum and watch them play. They're looking very good, and they're looking for, as far as the men, the Wonder Boys, looking for a couple players out of this next game that's going to take place tomorrow, and it's a high school game. Clarksville, Pottsville, they've got 3 signees from Clarksville. They're looking to get Michael Perry to commit as well to the Arkansas Tech men's basketball program, but I think Coach Carlson's going to pay particular attention to this game tomorrow night as the Apaches travel to Pantherland to take on the Clarksville Panthers. It's going to be a fun basketball game. I can't wait to watch it. Saw Clarksville fall to Bentonville the other night in, I want to call it controversial fashion, but they did. Bentonville did what they needed to do to win that game. I'm looking forward to a good game between former 4A4 conference foes and really the last 3 champions in 4A. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, a couple Clarksville and Pottsville last year. Absolutely. I know this is a big one for you. You're close with both programs. You know, it'll be interesting to see what Pottsville can do with Clarksville. Obviously, a lot of firepower from the Panthers' standpoint. They got obviously Freddie and Kendrick. They can put the ball in the hole. Jaron Thompson. They've got a lot of weapons. Pottsville, they're making out pretty nice without some of the guys they lost from last year's team. You mentioned they still have Michael Perry as well. So Clarksville favored tonight as expected, but Pottsville, Coach Thurman, Coach Hill, and those guys will have their team ready. That
game tomorrow night at Clarksville. Travis Cole, another guy who, we appreciate his dad, Jimmy, sending us pictures and things like that. But Travis, man, he has made a big step up from last year to this year. Last year he was a spot-up shooter, and not only can he drop bombs, and my goodness, he can shoot. He's able to put it on the floor and get to the basket some and hit the mid-range shot. That's one of the things Pottsville does better than about anybody I've ever seen. Hit the mid-range jumper. They don't just they don't just settle for threes, and they don't go barreling in there trying to make layups when they're not available. They'll hit the mid-range. They'll hit the mid-range shot, and then they'll D you up. And I think they're going to put a lot of pressure on teams in the conference because on the back end they're not going to have the rebounding and size that they had last year. They've got a guy named Stretch who's a big. I guess he's a junior this year. Big man who he's going to have to develop some. He's a tall kid, but he's not as big and wide as some of those guys they had last year, and Chris Albin and Trevor Manus and Corey McCown that played very well last year for those guys. So Pottsville looking to grow into this new look team altogether, coming up to defend their 4A championship. I'm looking forward to that game. Need to make mention though before we forget, as we switch back into football mode, that the Morrilton Devil Dogs made it to the 5A state championship game. They'll play at noon o'clock. They'll play at noon on Saturday against the Batesville Pioneers in the 5A state championship game. Congratulations to Morrilton on making it that far. The Hector Wildcats season came to an end in the quarterfinals on Friday against Junction City. They played a state powerhouse, Weldon, and they just were not able to overcome that just juggernaut of a team. But Hector, man, you can't say enough good things about the season that the Wildcats had.
Yeah, Hector had a good year. We knew it would be a challenge for them playing against Junction City. We knew they'd have to catch Junction City a little bit off. Unfortunately, they weren't able to do it, but a good season for them nonetheless. They won their league. In Morrilton, big win against Hope, going on the road and knocking them off. Now they're in position to win a state championship. I know Devil Dog, their fan base is proud as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good season. It was a great season for both Hector and Morrilton. Hopefully they can continue that and get a big win against Batesville. Like you said, that'd be a big win because Batesville is a perennial power there in the 5A. All right, let's move back real quickly. Actually, let's do this. Let's take our break real quick because we don't want to run over, and then because we've got a lot to talk about with this. Who should play in the national championship game talk, and maybe a little bit more Auburn bashing if I can make myself do it. I just don't know if I've got any more Auburn bashing left in me. I'm just a little hurt today about the fact that my national champion is probably maybe 5% at the most.
Blue Devils.
Chance of winning the national champion. We've got a guest on the line who you don't want to miss this call right after the break.
RiverValleyLeader.com is the #1 local source for instant news in the River Valley, offering HD video and live streaming along with top-notch coverage of all the news and events around the area. The River Valley Leader is the only place to go for all the information you need. Check out the newest local business featured on the site, as well as police news and coverage from important meetings, along with the personal stories, all at one convenient click. Check out RiverValleyLeader.com.
Hi folks, Richard Roberts with Cogswell Motors in Russellville. You know, we've been in business since 1949. A dealership doesn't stay in business that long under the same ownership unless you're doing something right, and that's taking care of customers. We have the largest selection of new Ford, Lincoln, Mazda, and pre-owned vehicles in the River Valley. So if you want the most for your trade, the best interest rate on financing, and the best price on a new or pre-owned automobile, come to Russellville and see us. We're at 1900 East Main, or visit us on the web at cogswellmotors.com.
If you didn't count on KARK4 today this morning,
Here's what you missed.
updated news,
Police continue searching for suspects after a home intrusion overnight.
developing stories,
There's another piece of presidential history turning up here in Arkansas.
and weather and traffic on the force.
Friday night, Saturday morning will bring us our next chance rain.
Every 10 minutes.
Around the clock.
Making your day easier.
So rise and shine and count on.
Count on.
Count on KRK4 today.
Over 69 years of treating you like family, Peters Family Living's main goal is customer service. That is their promise to their customers. They offer in-house financing on furniture and appliances and a 30-day money-back guarantee. For a friendly, no-pressure atmosphere, visit Peters Family Living today at 201 North Arkansas Avenue, Russellville. Online at petersfamilyliving.com or call 479-968-2929.
Today, there are more than 20 brands of cars being sold in America. So to be noticed, Ford and Cogswell Motors have to go further than anyone thought we could. How does Ford stand out above the crowd? Not just with plug-in vehicles like the new 2013 Ford Fusion Energy that gets a projected 100 miles per gallon equivalent, but also with a line of gas vehicles equipped with the innovative EcoBoost engines combining power and efficiency, plus a full measure of technologically advanced features. We invite you to stop into Cogswell Motors today. We go further than anyone thought we could, so that you can go further too.
Sports Blitz Monday in the Cogswell Motors studios. Mark Freeman, Weldon Braxton, Maddie Lassiter inside the studios. Brad Caldwell on the line. Brad, you and I have talked about this off the air. You've come on the show more than once and talked to us about the Arkansas football situation. And before we get anywhere else, we need to let you take your victory lap as far as you talking earlier on about the quarterback play for the University of Arkansas. Your thoughts on the game, your thoughts on the quarterback situation.
Well, number one, the LSU game was a bright spot, and there are some bright spots in the program when you come to the point of looking at how many freshmen Arkansas played against LSU and played pretty well. In fact, the loss came when a senior blew a coverage in cover two, which he should not have blown. I mean, that was as easy and as simple a coverage as you could ever have as a safety in the SEC, as a straight-up cover two. All he had to do was get over the top. That's why we lost the game. Brandon Allen played his best game of the year, probably, against LSU, but it still wasn't good enough. There were throws that he didn't make, including the interception in the end zone, which, I do have to wonder if his shoulder is not well. I mean, still, he doesn't seem like he can throw the ball past 30 yards without crow hopping. And, there's something wrong there because the kid has had a lively arm. But the fact of the matter remains that Brandon Allen as a starter has started 13 games. He's 3-10 as a starter. He's 0-9 as an SEC starter. And his numbers have been horrible for the most part against SEC play. The best two games that he had was against a very porous Texas A&M defense. And then a better LSU defense, but an LSU defense that's not vintage like it has been in the past. And to be honest with you, things that worry me going forward with Brandon Allen is the fact that, number one, he had a running game to rely on. We had almost two 1,000-yard backs, rushed for over 2,500 yards in the year, and then he was also sacked less than anybody but one other school in the NCAA. We kept him clean. and he still couldn't make the plays that needed to be made. I just don't see him as the answer. I think he's had a plenty of opportunity to do that now. I think you can look at 4 games, being the Rutgers game, the Florida game, the Mississippi State game, and the LSU game, and say if Arkansas had a better quarterback, they'd won all 4 of those games. And I know that sounds funny because Arkansas's defense was horrible for a lot of the season, but when you are a quarterback, you set the tone for everything. And that's what Brandon Allen did throughout the year. He set the tone, and the tone was not a good tone. And as I stated way back, I said that the quarterback play would be an issue. It was an issue, and I think it was the biggest issue on why the Razorbacks are a 3-9 and 0-8 SEC team.
All right,
I think there's some bright spots down the road, but I think the quarterback situation has to get fixed before Arkansas can be a serious contender.
Okay, then here's the big question that begs answering. These guys are getting paid a lot of money to make the decision on who's going to play quarterback. They have to look in practice every day, which is closed and we don't get to see, at the other quarterbacks and decide who's the best option. Who do you put in there other than Brandon Allen? What happens coming into next year? I mean, is there something that they could have done, in your opinion, Brad, to change the outcome of some of these games? Because, as you said, Brandon Allen didn't look like the answer. I'll agree. He didn't look very good. I kept saying, give him the chance. He's the best option that we have. But, from them watching practice every day and seeing Austin and seeing Doo-Wop and seeing everybody that they all saw, or everybody else that they saw, and then also into spring when they say, all right, Brandon Allen's better than Brandon Mitchell. What do you think Arkansas could have done in the quarterback situation?
Well, could have done, I'm not sure. I mean, that's why I'm not really pinning this a lot on the coaches. Now, there's a whole other conversation that I don't want to get into that I could talk to you about where Arkansas made the wrong choice by not hiring Gus Malzahn, period. That's my opinion. But I'm just gonna stay on track here and say that these coaches that we have right now did not have another choice. Now, I do think that the biggest mistake that they made all year was not pulling a red shirt off of one of those quarterbacks in the Rutgers game. The Rutgers game it set the tone for the season. I think had they won the Rutgers game, you might have seen them win a game or two more, and it wouldn't look nearly as bad as it did. But A.J. Derby has no business ever taking a Division I staff. That kid is the worst Division I quarterback I have ever seen in my life. And there was just no reason for him to be out there. And the scary part for me is if those 2 kids that are on campus right now are not any better than him, then we have a serious issue going forward at quarterback at the University of Arkansas, and you better get used to 3-9 and 4-8 because quarterback play is porous right now.
It is porous, Brad. And just, staying on this quarterback situation, I'm looking at it, and I agree with you. If Mitchell and Austin Allen couldn't beat out A.J. Derby, that makes you wonder. Or, again, we don't know what the coaches were thinking. Maybe they were so, stuck on keeping that red shirt on those kids. We just don't know that. But obviously the name hanging around for next year's Rafe Peavy, the incoming freshman from Bolivar, Missouri. He's shown the ability to throw the ball, but plays primarily in a running-style offense in high school. Questions about whether or not he'll translate early enough, even though he's talented, are out there. What have you heard on Rafe Peavy as far as his ability to translate, be a college quarterback, and play for the Razorbacks next year and be effective?
Well, I don't know. That's one thing that we'll find out. The great thing about him is he gets a spring to work with these the staff and these receivers and all that. So he's essentially getting a redshirt year. But I want to give you some positives, and then I want to give you some negatives. And let's just start with the positives. Number one, he went to these huge camps, Elite 11 camps, stuff like that, showed very well with his ability to throw the football. He also positively has the ability to run the football, rushed for over 1,000 yards this year at Bolivar. Some of the negatives that you might see, well, actually, let me say with a positive, one more positive is, I think the kid has some leadership qualities that Arkansas needs at quarterback, and that's something that we haven't had since, Tyler Wilson, obviously, but that's the things that you need to have in the SEC quarterback. Now, some of the negatives, I don't think the level of play that he played on in Missouri was that high. I watched his Bolivar team, and this could be construed as a positive or a negative. His Bolivar team didn't have much on the team. He was pretty much it. He was the one-trick pony. And he was 30-5 as a starter, but I don't think that their competition level was that great. I would basically say it's much like a Charleston, which we have another quarterback coming from Charleston in 2015. But I would say it's much like a Charleston, somewhere in there where they didn't have just a high level there of quarterback play, or I'm sorry, just competition in general. And so you got to wonder about that. But I think that the kid has some intangibles that he can start out with, including the fact that he can go in the spring and play this offense. And I'm just going to be honest with you, as a Hog fan, just speaking truly as a Hog fan, you have got to say that right now, if he doesn't come out, or one of these redshirt kids come out as the starter, either in spring or in the fall camp, we've got a problem. I just don't see Brandon Allen being able to do it. And here's why. Brandon Allen has already shown a ability to get his confidence shaken. And at quarterback, that can't happen. And he did it in the Louisiana Monroe game. He was the quarterback that was on the field, up 28-7. We lost the game to Louisiana Monroe. Now, play calling definitely had a part in that, but he also threw 12 straight incomplete passes against that Monroe team. So since that time, he really hasn't shown any kind of confidence as a quarterback. So to me, that shows right there he can't do it, and that's just my opinion. Now, if they can do some sort of psychology and set him on the couch and talk to him and maybe something happens, I do think he has the tools. But it's inside those ears that is the biggest problem with Brandon Allen. And I think going forward, we have to move on. We have to move on. Now, another situation you have to look at is the fact that we have his brother on campus. And from all indications I've heard in high school, the brother was a better quarterback than Brandon was, indicating by winning 2 state championships where Brandon was unable to win one. Now, you know, I don't know what the competition level was each of those years. Maybe Brandon faced a little stiffer competition. I'm not sure. But Austin was able to pull out the 2 state championships. Brandon wasn't. Now, we had a situation with the Casey Dick, Nathan Dick situation where Nathan Dick replaced Casey Dick, and at the end of that season, both of those were gone. The senior was gone, and the sophomore transferred. I wonder if Arkansas might be setting themselves up for that same type of situation if Austin is able to supersede Brandon.
Well, that's going to be another conversation for another day. And Brad, since I know you just got a couple minutes, I'll let you answer this because I've kind of teased it and I sort of want to look at it. You mentioned Gus Malzahn and not wanting to open that can of worms, but I do want to hear what you have to say about this because you and I couldn't disagree more on what happened at the end of last season. You know, you guys will remember if you watched our show that Weldon was the first person to mention Brett Bielema. We have to cut that promo where he said that because I said, God, no, because I was not a Brett Bielema fan. I would have rather them hired Gus Malzahn. But looking at what Maddie mentioned earlier in show prep, the fact that Gus Malzahn had an opportunity to coach at Auburn where he recruited these guys. They've got a higher star rating, player for player on both sides of the ball as far as recruits than Alabama even does. He's got an opportunity to coach at Auburn. He may or may not have had an opportunity to coach at Arkansas. Chances are very high that Gus Malzahn picked Auburn over Arkansas, and if he had the two sitting in front of him, he'd probably pick Auburn every day. What do you do if you're Arkansas in that situation? I mean, obviously Gus Malzahn picked for him the better job. I mean, what do you do if you're the University of Arkansas?
Okay, I'm just going to give you. I mean, you could do a whole show about this. Gus Malzahn wanted the job on 2 different occasions. One time when it was open, when Bobby Petrino was hired in 2007, December of 2007. Gus Malzahn wanted the job. Also, he wanted the job this time around as well, but because of the timing, he was not offered the job. So he really didn't even have the opportunity. Gus Malzahn, I do know of 2 people that have told me Gus Malzahn has stated the University of Arkansas was his dream job. I mean, a guy from the northwest part of the state. I mean, he lived in Fort Smith. a guy that played for the Razorbacks, although he did transfer to Henderson State. But he grew up around the Razorback program. He wanted the Razorback job, but the timing wasn't great. So, I will say that the fact of the matter is that we didn't even have a chance to hire him this time because of there were several things, including rumor, and I'm going to say this is a rumor because I don't know it to be a fact, but that Governor Mike Beebe stepped in and said, you cannot hire the Arkansas State coach to the University of Arkansas because he's an Arkansas State grad. I don't know if that's true or not. But here's what I do know. Arkansas had on a couple of occasions a chance to hire Gus, and they have passed on him. And the fact of the matter is there is a cloud that hangs over Gus's head from 2006. Now, I don't know if that 06 is his fault, or if it's Houston Nutt's fault, if it's a combination of two. I'm just telling you, 06 hangs over his head. Now, here's why I say that we should have hired Gus at some point. Okay? Number one, you just look at this season. I understand that Auburn had recruits, all that. But let's look back at 2012 when Auburn was 2-10, 0-8 in the SEC. Now, Gus wasn't around for that, number one. He was around for the winning seasons at Auburn. He leaves, the bottom falls out. It wasn't all the reason Gus, the reason the bottom fell out wasn't all Gus, but there was some of it in there. That Gus was basically propping up a program that was coached by the worst Division I coach to ever win a national championship from now till the end of history. I mean, it's just horrible. So, looking at that, they were 2-10 and 0-8. Arkansas goes to Auburn last year and beats Auburn with a 4-8 team and a two-win team in the SEC. Arkansas is 4-2 over the last 6 versus Auburn. So they have these big-time recruits, but these big-time recruits are not producing like maybe they should. I understand that there is a star rating there. I understand that there are things that Gus recruited these players, but the fact of the matter remains that this is the greatest turnaround in SEC history. And the fact of the matter is that Gus is 2-2 versus Nick Saban's defenses. The fact is he's 1-0 against Alabama as a head coach. The fact is Arkansas hasn't beaten Alabama since Gus Malzahn was on the sidelines. Arkansas hasn't won the SEC West since Malzahn was on the sidelines. Now, I understand it was a different day, different time in the SEC, the whole 9 yards, but all of these things add up to say we've made a mistake somewhere down the line saying that we didn't hire a guy that took a team that was 2 wins last year that completely just quit. They got beat 49-0 last year against Alabama. They turn around and beat them the next year. I mean, that's just an unbelievable turnaround. And I'm not saying that Brett Bielema won't get the job done here. I just look at the two, and I think that Gus has a higher ceiling than Brett in the SEC.
All right, Brad, thank you for the call. I know you got to get out of here.
Good stuff.
Thanks, guys.
It's Brad Caldwell. He's very passionate in his defense of Gus Malzahn, but I mean, all the stuff that he said, hypothetical stuff, all comes back to the first statement he made, Weldon, is that's that Arkansas didn't have, the timing was such that Arkansas didn't have an opportunity to hire Gus Malzahn as the coach.
Yeah, I just hate we didn't have more times. I feel bad talking about it without Brad on the line, But,
I'm going to rip him apart after this break, but he's all right with that.
I feel bad about it. But look, the points Brad made, I understand where they're coming from. I still don't think this necessarily means Brett Bielema was a bad fit. And I think Brad kind of acknowledged that. He said, I'm not saying Brett Bielema won't get it done. It's just Gus was the choice. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I just don't want the season of Arkansas and Auburn to factor into that logic.
Yeah, I won't rip him apart. I'll just be honest. I'll just say right now, I don't think if you flip the two, I think Gus Malzahn probably has a pretty crappy year at Arkansas, may have won a couple more games. Brett Bielema would have had more success than he did at Arkansas at Auburn. I don't think that Brett Bielema would have done what Gus did at Auburn because of the fact that these guys were recruited by Gus Malzahn to run this system, and he comes in and a perfect storm, man. That's where I come in with the lucky talk.
Right.
Things did have to break their way 100% of the time for them to be where they are, and they have. So a lot of that credit does go to Gus Malzahn. I told you beforehand, I'm not the biggest Brett Bielema fan, but I will support him until he gets his guys, he gets his system set up. I want to address the Rafe Peavy talk, too. Brad did allude to it a little bit in some of his concessions through his victory lap. I appreciate Brad calling in, and I like to have differing opinion from us, or from me at least, as often as we possibly can. We've got a break, but we've got plenty more Sports Blitz Hog Talk right after the break.
RiverValleyLeader.com is the #1 local source for instant news in the River Valley, offering HD video and live streaming along with top-notch coverage of all the news and events around the area. The River Valley Leader is the only place to go for all the information you need. Check out the newest local business featured on the site, as well as police news and coverage from important meetings, along with the personal stories, all at one convenient click. Check out RiverValleyLeader.com.
Hi folks, Richard Roberts with Cogswell Motors in Russellville. You know, we've been in business since 1949. A dealership doesn't stay in business that long under the same ownership unless you're doing something right, and that's taking care of customers. We have the largest selection of new Ford, Lincoln, Mazda, and pre-owned vehicles in the River Valley. So if you want the most for your trade, the best interest rate on financing, and the best price on a new or pre-owned automobile, come to Russellville and see us. We're at 1900 East Main, or visit us on the web at cogswellmotors.com.
If you didn't count on KARK4 today this morning,
Here's what you missed.
updated news,
Police continue searching for suspects after a home intrusion overnight.
developing stories,
It's another piece of presidential history turning up here in Arkansas.
and weather and traffic on the force.
Friday night, Saturday morning will bring us our next chance rain.
Every 10 minutes.
Around the clock.
Making your day easier.
So rise and shine and count on.
Count on.
Count on KRK4 today.
Over 69 years of treating you like family, Peter's Family Living's main goal is customer service. That is their promise to their customers. They offer in-house financing on furniture and appliances and a 30-day money-back guarantee. For a friendly, no-pressure atmosphere, visit Peter's Family Living today at 201 North Arkansas Avenue, Russellville. Online at petersfamilyliving.com or call 479-968-2929.
Today, there are more than 20 brands of cars being sold in America. So to be noticed, Ford and Cogswell Motors have to go further than anyone thought we could. How does Ford stand out above the crowd? Not just with plug-in vehicles like the new 2013 Ford Fusion Energy that gets a projected 100 miles per gallon equivalent, but also with a line of gas vehicles equipped with the innovative EcoBoost engines combining power and efficiency, plus a full measure of technologically advanced features. We invite you to stop into Cogswell Motors today. We go further than anyone thought we could, so that you can go further too.
Final segment of a Monday on the Sports Blitz. It's always a good show when we go off to break and we're still talking about the same topic that we were talking about before. Appreciate Brad Caldwell calling in, giving us his Gus Malzahn love. No, I have to give him as much crap as I can because he's on the Gus bus, man. He's firm in the corner that Gus Malzahn should have been the head coach of the Arkansas Razorbacks, but he did make the concession that, look, the timing was not such that he could have been the coach to come in and replace Bobby Petrino. I do think the talk from a bunch of different people that Brad probably heard about Gus Malzahn wanting the job twice, one of those times being when Bobby Petrino was hired. Look, if you've got the opportunity, and Maddie made the point in the break, Weldon and I both agreed, Bobby Petrino coming out of the NFL, knowing that he'd won a BCS game, at Louisville before, or Gus Malzahn, the offensive coordinator at Tulsa, who you picking? You're picking Bobby Petrino 10 times out of 10, not knowing his,
now, here's my quick
future
question.
discretions.
I don't want to misrepresent Brett. Was he saying that Arkansas could have hired him had they not have hired Bobby Petrino? Like if Petrino were off the table, they could have hired Gus but still wouldn't have? Or is he saying they picked him? I think
he was just saying that it was one of two times that Gus wanted the job.
Yeah.
And the other time being, this most recent one. Of course, he didn't have the opportunity. He was still coaching at Arkansas State, which he could have left. And, obviously Bielema left Wisconsin before the Rose Bowl. So he had an opportunity just the same as Gus Malzahn did, or as the same as Brett Bielema did. I think that Jeff Long decided to go in another direction, and it doesn't have anything to do with Mike Beebe. I promise you that. There is no way the governor's saying you can't hire. Weldon made the point. This is the biggest cash cow in the state, that, the University of Arkansas. You're going to tell the University of Arkansas, who's going to make you a whole lot of money if they're successful, that they can't hire a coach from Arkansas State, even though you know that Arkansas State is not where Gus Malzahn is going to end up. It is not his destination. It was a stepping stone.
Yeah. And I'm gonna be real quick. I know we still got to touch on basketball a little bit before we go out, so I'm gonna make my point real quick of where I stand on this. And I wish we had more time, Mark. And we always wish we had more time to discuss these things. But I'm with Brad as far as I'm a huge Gus Malzahn fan. The upside Brad mentioned, he is 100% right. I think Gus Malzahn in the next 5 years will be considered among the elite coaches in the country. I mean, he's a coach who's always had something in him. I know it's high school, but you could just see it in Springdale. This dude is detailed. He is on top of everything. He covers his bases. We will mention him in 5 years with the elite coaches in college football. But that is a separate conversation than saying Arkansas, they have a guy that can't get it done, because I don't think it means Brett Bielema can't get it done. I think he has to learn a few things about the SEC, and I think that he's going to have to get some things straightened out. But the man can run a program. I believe in Brett Bielema. I would have liked to have had Gus Malzahn too. I mean, he was my initial choice because of his upside, but I knew Jeff Long liked proven winners. That's why I mentioned Brett Bielema that day that we often play the tape on. Ultimately, though, I think Brett Bielema can and will get the job done. Gus Malzahn will get the job done at Auburn, too.
Just a couple more minutes. We've asked today's CrossFit Russellville poll question: who should play in the national championship game? We know it's not Arkansas. The top four right now in the BCS poll, in my opinion, is going to be one of these four that there's almost no chance that two of these four don't make it to the national championship game. You've got at number 1, Florida State. They beat Duke, and they're in the national championship game. Ohio State, Michigan State. Ohio State beats Michigan State. They play a Big Ten championship game too, then, don't they?
Yeah.
That is the Big Ten championship game.
Championship.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Ohio State beats Michigan State. They're in the national championship. The discussion's over. But at number 3, you've got Auburn. At number 4, you've got Alabama. I mentioned top 4. I meant top 5. Missouri, number 5 in the country. Missouri, Auburn playing in the SEC championship game. Alabama sort of sitting there hoping that two teams lose above them to get themselves into the national championship picture. First question, who's going to play in the national championship game? Second, who deserves to play in the national championship game?
I'm going to go ahead and say the top 2 teams in the country do get it done. I believe Florida State will beat Duke. I'm pretty confident in that. Michigan State's defense has the ability to give Ohio State problems. If OSU turns it over, Michigan State can win, but I'm going to give Ohio State the edge and just say Florida State and Ohio State. If some things happen, if Ohio State were to lose, Florida State were to win, I think at that point you would get the Missouri-Auburn winner taking on Florida State. If they were both to lose, if the Blue Devils, the Fighting Cutcliffs, pull it off, and if Michigan State pulls it off, then I think you will have an all-SEC national title between the SEC champion and the Alabama Crimson Tide.
I do think, the interesting part, I was looking at how Alabama can get back in the national championship picture. It's going to be very, very tough. If it were to possibly happen, what we would have to have happen is Ohio State would have to lose to Michigan State, because if that's the case, then you've got an Auburn or Missouri that would have a chance to jump up in there. If Auburn won, that would be cut and dried. They'd go to the national championship game against Florida State. If Missouri won, they would have the chance to jump Alabama. And, obviously, if Ohio State loses, Missouri would have the chance to jump Alabama, but you would have Alabama starting the week before the national championship discussion ahead of Missouri. And would that win over a team that just beat Alabama be enough to vault Alabama or Missouri over Alabama? I think it would.
Me too.
I think Missouri would go to the national championship game and face Florida State if Ohio State lost and Missouri won. But if Alabama is to have a chance, like you said, Florida State, Ohio State is pretty much the best chance. There is the very slight outside chance that, say, Missouri beats Auburn, Alabama somehow stays ahead of them in the computers and goes into the national championship game. You want to talk about just heat coming to the BCS in their final season. I do feel like that, like you said, the most likely scenario is that Florida State and Ohio State win and they play in the national championship.
Man, and we were up against it on the clock, but I really want to talk about a selection committee versus the BCS system now, because I think you would have totally different outcomes if you had a small committee sitting down looking at these teams, Alabama, Missouri, Ohio State. I think a small group of people who really think about and look at these things in detail would come up with possibly getting an Alabama back in the scenario, even over an undefeated Ohio State, or getting somebody like that. But when you have a big mass of voters and trends and history just kind of voting the way things have been, I think it's more likely you're going to see a traditional type outcome. But, man, I wish we had more time to talk about this.
Man, if there was a playoff system this year, the 4 teams, the 5th team is going to be mad.
Yeah.
Because you've got Auburn, Missouri playing in the SEC championship game. If Florida State and Ohio State won, they're the 1 and the 2, and then you've got the 3 and the 4 spots to fill. Auburn, Missouri, Alabama. Alabama's going to probably get in by default because one of those other two is going to knock the other out, most likely, unless it's just a barn burner and both of them somehow stay ahead of Alabama. Regardless, you would have some big controversy. So too bad this isn't next year. So we have this conversation. Of course, we will eventually.
Oh, yeah.
You'll have this sort of controversy come up in the bowl playoff that's coming in the future. I would have liked to have seen it be an 8 or 16 team playoff.
You want 32
but that's just,
teams, don't you?
No, I thought 16 at first. The more I thought about it, though, 8 probably is more likely to where the college football playoff will end up.
You know how I feel.
I understand where you're at, and I think that the 4 will put the best 4 teams together, and you won't have to worry about some of this crap down the end. But 8 teams in it would be a solid playoff. You'd have South Carolina, Stanford, and Oklahoma State and Missouri also in the conversation.
South
and
Carolina, I don't.
That could be. You don't think South Carolina could beat Ohio State?
I don't want them to, though. That's
But
the
they
thing.
could. That's what
regular
I'm saying.
Season.
I know. I understand that. I understand that.
They
but
can
an
beat
SEC,
them. I give you that.
An SEC team like South Carolina, who's lost 2 games this year, having a chance at Ohio State, who I think is a fraud. I thought I'd like to see it. I'd just like to see it. Of course, the way it is right now, South Carolina would be playing Florida State, and I think they get murdered in that game. But Stanford at number 7 could beat Ohio State. So 18 playoff, that's where it's going. We didn't even get the chance to talk about Arkansas basketball. We did mention that they lost to Gonzaga in the 5th place game in Maui, but they bounced back. They're 4-2 now. They play 7 o'clock tomorrow night against Southeast Louisiana. We'll be back on Wednesday to talk more Sports Blitz. We've got plenty of stuff to talk about. Peyton Manning's game last night, who's going to win the Heisman Trophy, more college football talk, our NFL power rankings, and much more. 11 o'clock on Wednesday for Weldon and Maddie and even Brad Caldwell. I'm Mark. We'll see you at 11 o'clock on Wednesday at rivervalleyleader.com.